Welcome back to today's video. As you can see, we recently went out for a little early fall excursion to our favorite local apple orchard, and it was a real treat. The day itself was beautiful, it was early in the season, so things weren't too picked over, and we just had a lovely day gathering a giant basket of my personal favorite, Crimson Crisp. After the apple orchard, we generally just eat the apples raw as they are. I mean, they're so crunchy and tart and delicious. They're really fine just as they are. But I love coming home and either making a pie or some kind of apple crisp or crumble. And I thought it would be really fun this year to make apple fritters. Now, when we go to the donut shop, which is very rarely because it's almost impossible to find a donut that isn't fried in some kind of unhealthy grease. So we don't go often, generally only for birthdays. But my favorite thing to get at the local donut shop is the apple fritter. I love it, hands down, over any other donut. It's so good. And so I thought it would be fun to make apple fritters today using our freshly picked Crimson Crisp apples. Now, Crimson Crisp are tart, but they're sweet. They have a really nice balance in my opinion. Besides wine sap, they are my favorite apple. So we're gonna go ahead today and make a homemade apple fritter, and I hope that you enjoy it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. All right, well, as you can see here, I woke up nice and early this morning and got my dough prepared because the dough needs 2 to 3 hours to rise, depending on the temperature of your kitchen. So I prepared that nice and early this morning, and it has been sitting on the counter with a towel over it ever since. This recipe calls for 2 cups of all-purpose flour, a teaspoon of yeast, a half a cup of milk, 1 egg, 4 tablespoons of sugar, a half a teaspoon of salt, and 6 tablespoons of butter. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna mix your dry ingredients first, and then you're gonna add in your butter. I like to just do it in little chunks by hand, and you're gonna mix it all together, similar to like a pie crust recipe. You're gonna use your hands to mix it up and incorporate all that butter into the dry ingredients. Then you're gonna add your egg and your milk, and go ahead and put it on a floured countertop and roll it out for the next 5-ish minutes or so until everything is incorporated nicely. After that's finished, you're gonna put it on the counter like I have done for the next 2 to 3 hours. After 2 to 3 hours, your dough will be sufficiently risen and ready to bake with. And as you can see, I have mine here, and it's not risen terribly high because my kitchen is cool today. We are having a nice rainy, cool fall day, but it's good enough for what I'm making today. So when I poke it, it's got a little spring to it. You can tell it's risen, and so it's ready to go. Now, with today's recipe, I am not gonna be frying these donuts, and there's a reason for that. We have violin lessons today, and I don't have time to be frying the donuts. I wanna kind of get these done in a relatively fast way. And so if you wanna do these the quote-unquote right way, you would fry them in a big vat of tallow. I don't have time for that today, so I'm going to bake these in the oven. And so depending on the amount of time you have, you can either fry these donuts or bake them. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna roll out our fritter dough onto the counter. Okay, and I'm gonna try to make between 4 and 6 fritters. I guess it just depends. I might wanna make them a little smaller. This dough is relatively thick, so I could probably do fine with 6. So now I've got my dough rolled out. I am gonna add a little bit more flour to the top of the dough. So the apple mixture is gonna go on top of here, which we're gonna make next, but I'm gonna add a little bit of flour on top just to help the apple mixture stick better. Okay, so now that I've got that rolled out, I'm gonna move on to making my sauteed apples. So this is so easy, honestly. It's not rocket science. We're gonna mix up apples with cinnamon, sugar, and butter. We're gonna saute it on the stove. We're gonna put it in here. We're gonna scramble everything together with our hands, and then we're gonna bake them. It couldn't be any easier. You got dough, you got apples and sugar, they marry each other, and voila, you have a fritter. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and saute our apples next. I'm gonna be using Crimson Crisps, like I mentioned today. That is my favorite variety of apple. I'm going to use about 4 medium-sized Crimson Crisp apples. You can use more if you like. It really just, it's so flexible. I mean, don't use 20, but you can use 5 if you'd rather have a more apple-y fritter, or you can use less if you don't like the taste of apples overwhelming your fritters. It's really up to you. And we're just gonna cut them in small little 1/2-inch pieces. And I'm gonna leave the skins on mine because I'm that kind of a girl. I like skins on my apples. It's more nutrition anyway. These fritters would make a great tea time treat for an afternoon tea with a nice cup of hot Yorkshire Gold. All right, so now we're gonna add our butter. I've got my butter here, and it's nice and soft. A pinch of salt. And we're gonna add our cinnamon. You can use a little more if you'd like. I'm gonna be using just around 2 teaspoons of cinnamon today. Now I'm gonna add in my sugar. And I'm actually using sucanat today, which is my sweetener of choice when it comes to baking most of the times. Okay, we're gonna give everything a good stir now, and then we're gonna bring it over to the stove and saute it for about 5 to 10 minutes until the apples are soft. All right, here are our apples, all nice and sauteed up. I did go ahead and turn the oven on to 425 while I was cooking these, so if you haven't done that yet, go ahead and do that. So this has been cooling for a little bit, and it's now ready to put inside our dough. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna add our apple mixture to the center of this dough. All right, now I'm gonna get all that liquid in there too, because that will make it taste that much better. So now that they're nice and spread out, I'm gonna go ahead and roll this like a cinnamon roll, but I am gonna fold in the sides a little bit too. Just like that. Okay. And this is the part that's really fun. So now we've got our big roll of dough and apples, and we're gonna cut it like you would a cinnamon roll, just a nice rough chop. And then we're gonna cut it down the middle, like so. So now we're gonna take our hands and kind of gloop it together. And now we're gonna cut off big hunks of our dough and apple mixture. And we're gonna put it on a pan and let it bake. So as you can see, we've gone ahead and added our big clump of doughy apple mixture. And this does not have to be perfect. This is a fritter. It's meant to be messy. So the way it looks is I will get about 6 good fritters. And I did put extra apples in mine because that's what I like. This is gonna be a big one. All right, we're gonna put this one here. Okay, I've got a few extra apples. We'll just sprinkle on top. And now these fritters are gonna go in the oven at 425 for the next 15 minutes. Once they come out of the oven, I am gonna go ahead and let them rest. We're gonna head to violin lessons. And then when I get home, I will go ahead and glaze them. All right, they're done, my friends. I know what you were thinking when we put them in. How are these gloopy, gloppy, apple-filled dough balls gonna turn into anything pretty? They do. The beautiful thing about fritters is that they're meant to be messy. And so as you can see, these are just shaggy dough balls filled with cinnamon, sugar, butter, and apple. So now I'm gonna let these sit out and we're gonna head to violin lessons. And when we get home, we're gonna make our glaze. And after we glaze them, they'll be ready to eat and enjoy. Okay friends, we are back from violin lessons and it's time to frost our baked apple fritters. So I have here a cup of powdered sugar. I have more milk than I need, but just in case I brought a little extra over. We're gonna use some vanilla and a pinch of salt, and that will be our glaze for our fritters. And so I'm gonna just get started by adding a bit of milk, a couple tablespoons, to the powdered sugar. And we're gonna add some vanilla. I'd say about half a teaspoon, maybe more. I like mine extra vanilla-y. And then I like to add a little pinch of salt into my glazes because salt brings out the sweet flavor. So now I'll go ahead and stir this up. The fritters are nice and cool now, so obviously glazing them is fine. Okay, and now I'm just gonna go ahead and glaze the tops of these fritters. Now this glaze will harden eventually, but for now I'm just gonna let it kind of run over the sides. And it will be the perfect finishing touch to our homemade apple fritters. So that is it. Now, a good friend of mine mentioned that it would be a lovely idea to take a bite of the final product in front of you. And so that is what I'm gonna do today. And we can just see how it tastes together, shall we? Very good. I think this would be absolute bliss with a hot cup of black coffee. Because it almost has like a Danish taste to it. It doesn't taste like your donut shop donut. It's not fried, so it has more of a bready taste to it. But it is still delicious. So that's it. There are our homemade baked apple fritters with apples freshly picked from the orchard. I hope that you enjoyed today's video, my friends, and I hope you try your hand at making your own homemade fritters. And as usual, I look forward to seeing you in another brand new video very soon. Goodbye for now.